They always preferred my sister, Mallory, even when she was clearly in the wrong and I ended up taking the blame. I'm the eldest, the one who always tried to smooth things over, kept the peace. It's just the way it is, I think, when you're born first. You inherit this responsibility whether you want it or not. Mallory, well, she's always been different, expecting things to fall into place without much effort on her part. Last year, she came to me all tears and drama, saying she couldn't live at home anymore. Mom and Dad, Deborah and Martin, they can be a lot to handle, I'll admit. They're the classic overbearing parents, always convinced they know best, constantly pushing their opinions. Mallory painted this vivid picture of how they were ruining her life, how she felt suffocated by their rules, and how desperately she needed to escape. She said everything I needed to hear, I just need some space to figure things out. I'll start applying for jobs as soon as I'm settled. I swear I'll handle things after the first few months. She laid it on thick, tears streaming down her face. How could I not feel bad for her? I thought maybe this is the push she needs to finally get her act together. So I went all in and helped her find a small apartment, nothing fancy, but clean and safe. I covered the first month's rent and the deposit. I even helped her furnish the place with some basics, just enough so she wouldn't be sitting in an empty room. I made it perfectly clear that this wasn't a permanent solution. Mallory, I told her firmly, I'll help you for a few months, but after that, you're on your own. You need to step up. Initially, she seemed genuinely grateful. She kept repeating things like, you're the best sister ever. I can't believe you're doing this for me. It felt good, I have to admit, to be able to help her, to feel like I was making a real difference in her life. But that feeling faded fast. For the first couple of months, I checked in on her regularly, asking how her job search was progressing. Every time, she had some excuse ready, the market's terrible right now, or I'm so stressed, I just need a bit more time. Meanwhile, she wasn't even trying. She was spending her days lounging around or going out with friends, acting like she had all the time in the world. I kept covering her rent because she always had a reason why she couldn't pay it yet. At first, I told myself she just needed a little more time to find her feet. By the third month, I started to feel like I was being taken advantage of, used as a convenient ATM. Then, in the fourth month, disaster struck on my end. My car broke down and the repair bill was astronomical, completely draining my savings. I told Mallory straight up, I can't cover your rent this month. You're going to have to figure it out. I might as well have told her the sky was falling. She transformed from grateful little sister into full-blown drama queen in a heartbeat. She threw a tantrum, accused me of abandoning her, and called me selfish after everything I'd done. I tried to explain that I wasn't abandoning her, that I simply couldn't afford it that month, but she wouldn't listen. She stormed off, slamming the door, and I didn't hear from her for days. I hoped this would be the wake-up call she needed, that she would finally realize she needed to take some responsibility. But no, of course not. Mallory ghosted me for almost 2 weeks. I assumed she was either still furious with me or, against all odds, was finally getting her life in order. I tried to give her some space because, frankly, I couldn't handle any more of her drama. Then Mom called and everything suddenly clicked into place in the worst possible way. My mom didn't call to see how I was doing or to ask if I was okay. No, she called to berate me. Why are you being so cruel to Mallory? She demanded. I was floored. Cruel? Where did that even come from? Apparently, Mallory had gone straight to Mom and Dad and painted this ludicrous picture of me forcing her to move out and then just abandoning her to, what? Drown? According to her, I'd promised her the moon and stars, complete financial security, and then, poof, disappeared without a word. She'd even told them I was mean to her, completely unsympathetic to her struggles. Mom's reaction was immediate and fierce. She's your sister, she'd practically shouted. She's having a hard time. How could you just leave her in the lurch like that? Later that night, Dad echoed the same sentiments, a slightly gentler version of Mom's anger. They both spoke to me like I was some kind of monster, like I'd committed some unspeakable crime against Mallory. That's when the truth really sank in. This wasn't just Mallory being, well, Mallory. This was a deliberate, calculated campaign. She was actively lying to our parents, crafting this elaborate sob story to cast herself as the blameless victim. And the truly gut-wrenching part? They were buying it, hook, line, and sinker. I tried to explain my side to set the record straight. I recounted how she'd pleaded with me for help, how I'd been covering her rent for months, how I simply couldn't sustain it any longer given my own finances. But it was like talking to a brick wall. She can barely make ends meet, Mom insisted. She's overwhelmed and just needs a little more time. How could you possibly just leave her high and dry? Nothing I said seemed to matter. They'd already made up their minds. In their eyes, Mallory was the perpetually struggling little sister, and I was the cold, unfeeling older sibling who'd abandoned her in her time of need. Meanwhile, I learned through a mutual friend, someone who wasn't swayed by Mallory's theatrics, that she was still living it up with her friends. Parties, dinners, shopping trips, she was doing everything except looking for a job. Overwhelmed? Hardly. She just didn't want to work. When I finally confronted her, she didn't even bother to deny it. She just shrugged, that infuriatingly casual shrug, and said, well, maybe if you hadn't cut me off, I wouldn't have had to go to them. And she had this smug, self-satisfied look on her face, like she was genuinely proud of herself for manipulating our parents into taking her side. That's when I realized this wasn't going to be a quick fix. Mallory wasn't just irresponsible, she was a master manipulator. And she had Mom and Dad completely under her spell. Honestly, I felt completely helpless. How do you even begin to argue with people who are so convinced they're right, who refuse to see any other perspective? No matter what I said, what evidence I presented, or how much effort I'd already poured into helping her, it was all irrelevant. In their world, Mallory was the innocent victim and I was the heartless villain who'd left her to fend for herself. It wasn't just frustrating, it was utterly exhausting. I kept replaying those phone calls with Mom and Dad in my head, searching for something I might have missed, something I could have said differently. But no, it all came back to Mallory and her carefully constructed narrative. She was the one who decided to twist the truth to turn my parents against me. And what made it even worse was that she didn't seem to feel even a shred of guilt. After that conversation, I couldn't bring myself to contact her. What would be the point? She was perfectly content playing the role of the struggling victim while I was left to deal with the mess she'd created. Meanwhile, she continued to live her carefree life, secure in the knowledge that my parents were defending her every move. The thing is, in the beginning, I wasn't even angry. Deep down, I think I was mostly just hurt. How could my own sister do something like that to me? I'd truly gone above and beyond for Mallory, making sure she was all right even when it inconvenienced me. So, it felt like a real betrayal when I learned she'd twisted the truth to her parents, painting me as some sort of villain. It stung. About a week later, Mom called again, and this time her voice was laced with fury. Mallory says she's going to be evicted, she announced, her tone accusatory. How could you let that happen? I almost laughed in disbelief. I didn't let anything happen, Mom, I retorted, trying to keep my voice even. She's a grown woman. If she can't manage her rent, that's her responsibility. Then came the real blow. You promised to help her until she got a job, Mom snapped, so you just abandoned her when she needed you most? I was floored. Oh, Mom, I sighed, struggling to remain composed. I supported her for months. I covered her rent, furnished her apartment, gave her everything she needed to get on her feet. She hasn't even bothered to look for a job. She's been out partying and spending time with her friends, avoiding any real responsibility. But Mom was unwavering. She's stressed, she insisted. You don't understand how difficult things are for her right now. It was in that moment, listening to Mom's blind defense, that I realized I couldn't reason with her. Regardless of what I said, no matter how much evidence I presented, she was determined to believe Mallory's version of events. Mallory had gotten to her first, poisoning her mind, and that was all that mattered. The situation didn't improve. A few days later, Dad called, his tone weary. Your mother's really upset, he said. You need to sort this out. Sort what out? I asked, my patience wearing thin. I've already done more than enough for Mallory. She needs to take ownership of her life. He responded with, you're her brother, as if that one fact magically excused everything. If she needs more time, why can't you just keep helping her out a little longer? Because I'm not her personal ATM, I snapped, instantly regretting my sharp tone. She's 25, Dad. She's not a child anymore. She needs to grow up. He didn't say much after that, just muttered something about his disappointment. By the end of the call, I was so frustrated I could barely string a coherent thought together. I began to actively avoid their calls. I couldn't face the constant barrage of accusations and guilt trips. Every conversation devolved into the same circular argument and I was exhausted from defending myself. If they were determined to believe Mallory's fabricated stories, that was their choice. I wasn't going to waste my energy fighting a losing battle. But then a mutual friend reached out with information that completely changed everything. Hey, I thought you should know, they began hesitantly. Mallory's been telling everyone that you're still supporting her. I was immediately confused. What do you mean? I asked. She's been bragging about how you're still paying her rent, they said, their voice tinged with disbelief. She even joked about how she doesn't need a job because her brother has it covered. A wave of fury washed over me. Not only had she lied to our parents, but she was now spreading these lies to everyone we knew. And she was doing it so casually, as if it was perfectly normal and acceptable. It was in that moment I decided I needed to confront her directly. I picked up the phone, dialed her number, and said, in a voice as level as I could manage, "Mallory, we need to talk." Her voice, when she answered, held no hint of nervousness or guilt. If anything, she sounded simply annoyed. "What is it now?" she sighed. "I know what you've been saying," I stated, my voice firm. "I know you've been lying to Mom and Dad, and I know you've been boasting to your friends about how I'm still paying your bills. What is wrong with you?" The words were a slap in the face, and she didn't even bother with denial. "So what?" she tossed back, her tone infuriatingly casual. "If you had just kept bailing me out, none of this would have happened. A girl's gotta do what a girl's gotta do. Survive?" The question choked me. "You've been living it up, going out with your friends, while I've been killing myself trying to help you, and now you're spinning this whole web of lies? Seriously?" She actually laughed. "You're such a drama queen," she said dismissively. "It's not the end of the world." That's when it hit me, the cold, hard truth. Mallory wasn't just immature or irresponsible. She was a textbook narcissist. My feelings, my efforts, meant absolutely nothing to her. She didn't give a damn that she was trashing my reputation or that she was putting me in an impossible position with Mom and Dad. All that mattered to her was avoiding the fallout from her own bad choices. I slammed the phone down, the finality echoing in the room. I was done. Done enabling her, done defending her, done being the one who always had to swoop in and clean up the mess she made. I had no idea what the future held, but one thing was crystal clear: I wasn't going to let her drag me down with her. Of course, my family wasn't about to let me off the hook so easily. I screened their calls for days, hoping they'd eventually back off. No such luck. Every few days, another voicemail from Mom, her voice thick with disappointment and guilt. "Why are you letting this destroy our family?" she'd plead, or worse, "I raised you better than this." Dad wasn't one for theatrics, but his tactics were just as effective. His texts were concise but cutting: "We need to talk," or "I'm worried about you." It was like they didn't want to hear my side of the story. They just wanted me to fix things, and by fix, they meant give Mallory whatever she wanted, no questions asked. Then came the summons, or rather, the demand for a family intervention. Mom cornered me one evening, and I finally answered because I knew running away forever wasn't an option. "We need to sit down and sort this out as a family," she insisted. Every instinct in me screamed no. I knew, deep down, that it would only turn into another blame game, with me inevitably cast as the villain. But there was this tiny, stubborn sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, this could be a chance to set the record straight. I clung to the thought that if I presented them with all the facts, they would finally understand. So, reluctantly, I agreed. On the appointed day, I arrived at my parents' house armed to the teeth with evidence. I had screenshots of bank transfers, texts from Mallory expressing her gratitude, however insincere, and even messages from mutual friends confirming that she hadn't exactly been pounding the pavement looking for a job. If they were going to accuse me of abandoning her, I was determined to show them exactly what I had done for her. I stepped into the living room, and the air was thick with tension. My parents were perched on the couch, arms crossed, their expressions suggesting they'd already reached a verdict. And then there was Mallory nestled between them with that infuriatingly smug look she always wore when she thought she had the upper hand. She couldn't even be bothered with a greeting. "All right," I said, settling into the armchair across from them, "let's get this over with." My mom didn't waste any time. "We just want to understand why you've been so cruel to your sister," she accused. Cruel. That word sent a jolt of anger through me, but I took a deep breath and tried to remain calm. "Mom, I've been bending over backwards for Mallory for months. I covered her rent. I furnished her apartment. I did everything humanly possible to help her get back on her feet. What more do you want from me?" "And you abandoned her," my dad added, his voice low and disapproving. "She wasn't ready, and you just left her to drown." "I didn't abandon her," I retorted, my voice rising. "She's a grown woman. At some point, she has to take responsibility for her own actions. I gave her a jump start, and she squandered it." Mallory dramatically rolled her eyes. "Oh, here we go," she sighed, as if she were bored by the whole thing. "Oh, here comes the permy routine." I bit back a retort and grabbed my phone. "Want to see the reality of it?" I asked, my voice tight. "Here, look at these screenshots of rent payments I made for her. Look at these texts where she was practically begging for my help, promising she'd get serious about finding work. And these are messages from her own friends saying she hadn't even bothered looking." I thrust the phone towards Mom, but she barely glanced at the screen before pushing it back at me. "This isn't about evidence," she stated, her voice heavy with disappointment. "This is family. You're supposed to support each other." And I did support her. I shot back, my voice louder than I intended. I was the only one who was supporting her. And how did she pay me back? by twisting everything and making me the villain in her story. Mallory gasped dramatically as if I'd committed some unspeakable act by daring to call her out. I didn't lie, she insisted, her voice dripping with wounded innocence. I just told them what happened. You pushed me to move out and then you left me to struggle on my own. That's not how it happened and you know it, I said, turning to face her directly. You practically begged me to help you get out of the house. I gave you the chance to start over, everything you needed. And instead of taking responsibility, you just sat around, waited for things to magically improve, and then blamed me when they didn't. Mallory didn't even bother trying to refute my version of events. Instead, she immediately launched into a plea for sympathy. You don't understand how incredibly difficult this has been for me, she said, her voice wavering precariously. I've been so stressed and overwhelmed, I'm doing the best I possibly can. That's when something inside me snapped. Your best? I asked, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. Your best involves hanging out with your friends and bragging about how your incredibly generous sibling is footing all your bills? That's your best effort. Mallory's face flushed crimson with anger and embarrassment. But before she could muster a response, Mom stood up abruptly. Enough, she declared firmly. We're not going to sit here and let you verbally attack your sister like this. Attack her? I countered, rising to my feet as well. I'm not attacking her. I'm stating facts. But I suppose that doesn't matter, does it? You've already decided I'm in the wrong. Dad shook his head sadly. You've changed, he said, his voice laced with disappointment. You're not the son we thought we raised. That comment stung more than I wanted to admit, but I refused to let them manipulate me with their guilt trip. No, I said, forcing myself to maintain eye contact. I'm the same person I've always been. The difference is I'm finally done letting Mallory take advantage of me at every turn. With that, I turned and walked out of the house. I resisted the urge to slam the door despite the intense frustration building inside me. I just walked away. As I drove home, the entire exchange replayed in my head, over and over. I found myself questioning whether I could have handled things differently, whether there was some magic combination of words that would have made them understand. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't have mattered. They weren't interested in hearing the truth. They just needed someone to blame for Mallory's situation, and I was the most convenient target. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I had made a firm decision. I wasn't going to waste any more energy trying to justify myself to people who were determined not to listen. If they chose to believe Mallory's fabricated version of events, that was their choice. But I refused to let them continue to drag me down with them. I wasn't willing to continue fighting a losing battle, one where the opposing side had no interest in the truth. I knew there was absolutely no point in trying to convince my parents otherwise, especially after that disastrous family meeting. They were firmly on Team Mallory regardless of any evidence I presented. So I just decided to disengage completely. I reasoned that if I ignored the drama long enough, they might eventually come to their own realization of the truth. For a few weeks, an unsettling quiet settled over everything. The constant calls from my parents dwindled, a small victory, maybe, but it did little to ease the nagging feeling that something was brewing just beneath the surface. Then, completely out of the blue, my phone rang. It was Mallory's old landlord. Are you Mallory's emergency contact? He barked, his voice already laced with irritation. I hesitated, a knot forming in my stomach. Yeah, I guess so. What's wrong? She's abandoned the apartment, he stated bluntly. Left it a complete disaster, holes punched in the walls, garbage piled everywhere, and some of the furniture is gone. I've been trying to reach her, but she's not answering. Do you know where she is? I took a slow, deliberate breath. Nope, I said, trying to keep my voice even, and frankly, it's not my concern anymore. Well, she owes a substantial amount for damages and back rent, he said, his voice rising in pitch. If you hear from her, tell her we'll be pursuing legal action if she doesn't pay up. I hung up without another word. I wasn't about to become her messenger. But I was fuming. That furniture he was talking about? A good chunk of it was stuff I'd bought for her when she first moved in, trying to help her get settled, and now it was either ruined or missing. Typical Mallory. Burning every bridge in sight and leaving someone else to deal with the fallout. I considered calling my parents to tell them about it, but the thought quickly died. What was the point? They'd just make excuses for her, justify her actions the way they always did. Then, a few days later, my cousin Kara called. Kara and I have always been close, and she's one of the few people in my family who can see through Mallory's manipulative games. Hey, I know you're kind of isolating yourself right now, but you really need to see this, she said, her voice serious. She sent me a screenshot from Mallory's private Instagram account, the one she keeps locked down, away from most of the family's prying eyes. In the picture, Mallory was sitting at what looked like a really fancy cafe, dressed in expensive clothes, holding a latte with some kind of elaborate design in the foam. The caption read, "Treating myself because I deserve it." I stared at the photo for what felt like a full minute, struggling to process it. This was the same person who had been weeping to my parents about being broke and completely overwhelmed. The same person who trashed her apartment and skipped out on rent, and now she was out living the high life, treating herself. I forwarded the screenshot to my parents with a short, pointed message. "This is the person you're defending." My mom called me almost instantly. "It's not what it looks like," she said, her voice wavering. "What isn't what it looks like?" I asked, trying to control my rising anger. "She's clearly not struggling. She's out there spending money, living it up, while you're bending over backwards, making excuses for her." "Oh well, maybe someone else paid for it," she said quickly, her voice strained. "You don't know the full story." "I don't care who paid for it," I said, trying to keep my voice steady and even. "The point is, she's not overwhelmed or broke like she claims. She's just using people, and you're enabling her." There was a long, heavy silence before my mom spoke again, her voice soft. "Oh, you're being too hard on her," she said quietly. "She's under so much stress. You don't understand what she's going through." I hung up before I said something I'd seriously regret. A week later, things took an even stranger turn. Trent, one of Mallory's ex-boyfriends, reached out to me completely out of the blue. We hadn't spoken in years, but apparently he'd heard about the whole mess through mutual friends. "Hey, I really don't want to get in the middle of your family drama, but I thought you should know something," he said. I sighed, bracing myself for whatever was coming next. "What is it?" "Mallory pulled the same stunt on me when we were dating," he said. "She moved in with me, told me she needed help to get back on her feet, and then she basically used me to pay for everything. Rent, groceries, utilities, you name it. All the while, she was secretly stashing money from her side jobs in a separate bank account." I wasn't surprised, not really. If anything, it just confirmed my suspicions, giving them a solid foundation. "So, she's done this before?" I said, my voice flat. "Yeah," he said. "And from what I've heard, she's doing pretty well for herself right now, a lot better than she lets on." "What do you mean?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. "Well, someone mentioned she's been spending a lot lately. Like, way more than someone who's supposedly broke should be spending," he said. "Trips, shopping sprees, all that kind of stuff." He thought I deserved to know because she had a real talent for convincing people her stories were true. I thanked him, but after I hung up, his words kept swirling in my head. If Mallory had a hidden stash of money, it would explain a lot of her behavior. Like how she always seemed to land on her feet, no matter how many bridges she burned. But the big question was, where was she getting it? A few days later, Kara called again, sounding almost bubbly. "You are not going to believe this," she practically sang. "What is it now?" I asked, already bracing myself for whatever came next. "She's posting on her private Instagram again," Kara told me, "but this time it's not just one picture. It's a whole stream of them." She sent me screenshots, and honestly, my jaw practically hit the floor. There was Mallory looking totally relaxed at what seemed like a super fancy spa, lounging in a plush robe next to a sparkling pool. Then another picture of her shopping in what I immediately recognized as that super chic boutique downtown. The captions were all variations of the same theme, some bubbly motivational text like "treat yourself" and "living my best life." I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. Where on earth was she getting the money for all this? I decided to do some digging of my own. I started with her social media, going through every post, every tag, every comment I could find. A lot of it was private, but there were small breadcrumbs here and there, mentions of expensive places, photos of lavish meals, even comments from her friends joking about her major glow-up. The more I looked, the more I started to realize that Mallory wasn't just scraping by, she was actually thriving, or at least doing a really good job of pretending to. But the question remained, how? I even thought about reaching out to some of her friends, but I wasn't sure how much they knew or if they'd even tell me the truth if they did. I definitely didn't want to tip her off. If she knew I was looking into her life, she'd probably just become more guarded or spin some new story to make me look like the bad guy. The whole thing felt like a complex puzzle, and I wasn't even sure I could find all the pieces. But one thing was becoming crystal clear: Mallory wasn't struggling. She wasn't overwhelmed or under any pressure like she'd been telling everyone. She was definitely hiding something, and I was determined to find out what it was. At this point, I wasn't just frustrated, I was completely invested. Mallory had told so many lies that it was becoming hard to even remember what was real anymore. But the pictures, the trips, the designer clothes, they all pointed to one thing: she wasn't as broke or as stressed as she wanted everyone to believe. She was concealing something, and I wanted answers, damn it. The more I dug, the more inconsistencies I uncovered. For example, I found some comments on her older Instagram posts from a few months back. Things like, "Can't wait to see you in LA and living the dream, girl." LA? Mallory had never mentioned anything about traveling to our parents, and she definitely hadn't said a word to me. Another weird thing was just how polished her lifestyle seemed, even when she was supposedly struggling to make ends meet. Her photos looked carefully curated, like she was working hard to project an image of success. Everything was meticulously perfect, the backgrounds, the outfits, even the captions themselves. It all felt staged, like some kind of performance she was putting on for her online audience. Then there were her friends. I didn't recognize most of the people who were commenting on her posts. They weren't the same crowd she used to hang out with, the ones who were always tagging her in party photos and sharing inside jokes. These new people were different. They seemed more sophisticated, more well-off. It made me wonder if Mallory had completely changed her social circle to fit whatever image she was trying to cultivate. A few days later, Kara called me again. "I think I might have something for you," she said, her voice hushed like she was afraid someone might overhear. "What is it?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. "Remember that post from the boutique?" she asked. "The one where she was showing off all those shopping bags?" "Yeah?" I responded, waiting for the catch. "Well, one of my friends works there," she said. So I asked her about it, and guess what? Mallory didn't even pay for most of that stuff. I'd heard whispers, unsettling little rumors about how she'd been showing up with people who were picking up her tab. I scowled more to myself than anyone else. "Who, exactly?" Kara was being annoyingly vague. "I don't know specifics," she'd said, but a friend mentioned Mallory's been attached to some guy who's throwing money at her. No idea who he is, but definitely not local. That explained a chunk of the shopping sprees, I suppose, but not the everything. I thanked Kara, filed the info away, and kept digging. Later that week, another piece of the puzzle landed in my lap, totally unexpectedly, from Claire, Mallory's old roommate. I hadn't spoken to Claire in ages, then suddenly there was a message. "Hey," it read. "I don't know if it's my place, but I think you should know Mallory's been acting weird." Weird felt like the understatement of the century. "Weird how?" I typed back. Claire's response was lengthy and detailed, painting a pretty unflattering portrait. Apparently, Mallory had weaseled money out of Claire months ago, claiming she was desperate for rent. "She swore she'd pay me back," Claire wrote, and then just disappeared. Now I'm seeing all this stuff she's posting on Instagram, and it just doesn't add up. She owes me over $800, but she's living this queen lifestyle. I wanted to crawl under a rock. I apologized to Claire for Mallory's behavior, even though it wasn't my fault, and promised I'd try to figure things out. By then, I pretty much had a picture of what was going on. Mallory seemed to have built her entire existence on lies and manipulation. Cut ties with anyone who challenged her, surrounded herself with people who didn't know the truth, and kept up the charade by letting others bankroll her. But I needed hard evidence. If I was going to confront her, or anyone else in the family for that matter, I needed to be absolutely certain. So, I started sifting through her social media again, this time focusing on who was tagging her or mentioning her in posts. It didn't take long to find something that caught my eye. One of the people tagging her, a woman called Sophia, had a public profile. Sophia's posts showed her at all the same places Mallory had been flaunting, fancy boutiques, spas, and even a rooftop party that looked straight out of a movie. The captions were carefully vague, but hinted at some kind of business relationship, things like "another successful meeting" or "celebrating our achievements." But one post in particular screamed red flag, a photo of Mallory and Sophia sprawled on a couch surrounded by shopping bags. The caption read, "Grateful for my team and all the hard work we've put in." Team? What team? The more I dug into Sophia, the more skeptical I became. She didn't seem to have a regular job, not that she advertised anyway, but she posted a lot about hustling and making moves. It all felt like smoke and mirrors, like she was trying to sell an image instead of an actual product. And Mallory was right there in the thick of it. Honestly, at that point, I couldn't tell if Mallory was actively scamming people, getting scammed herself, or just hitching a ride for the freebies. But it was clear she wasn't the broke, struggling soul she was pretending to be. Instead of running straight to my parents with everything I'd uncovered, I decided to hold back for a little while. I wanted more solid answers before I dragged them into it. If I rushed and half-cocked, Mallory would just spin another tale to make me look like the villain, and I wasn't about to give her that satisfaction. And then, completely out of the blue, Mallory called. "Hey," she said, her voice sounding oddly cheerful. "How are you?" I was caught off guard. We hadn't spoken since that disastrous family meeting, and now she was acting like nothing had happened. "Oh, fine," I mumbled. "What do you want?" She let out this fake little laugh, like I told some kind of joke. "I just wanted to catch up." Feels like it's been forever. I narrowed my eyes even though she couldn't see me. Why now? I asked. No reason, she said quickly, too quickly. I just miss talking to you. I didn't buy it for a second. What do you really want, Mallory? There was a long pause and then she sighed dramatically. Look, I know things have been tense between us, but I think we should just forget all that. We're family, you know? I ended the call as fast as I could. Whatever Mallory was plotting, it couldn't be good, and I had a sinking feeling I was about to find out exactly what it was. Mallory's sudden, overly cheerful call had lingered in my mind, a discordant note in my otherwise ordinary day. But it didn't take long for the truth to bubble to the surface like oil on water. A few days after that unsettling phone call, the scattered pieces of a puzzle started to coalesce, forming a picture I desperately didn't want to see. A gnawing feeling settled in my stomach. She was in trouble. And, as was usually the case with Mallory, she was reaching out only after exhausting all other options, painting me into a corner. Then came the explosion, the moment I knew everything was crashing down. Late one evening, my phone buzzed with a call from Mom. The sound of her voice sent a jolt of ice water through my veins. It was shaky, strained, and instantly I knew something profoundly wrong. She's in jail, she blurted out. For a split second, I felt a disorienting wave of disbelief, as if the words had been spoken in a language I didn't understand. What? Who's in jail? I managed to choke out, the words tight in my throat. Mallory, she whispered, the name barely audible. She's been arrested. What did she do this time? I asked, the weariness in my voice a heavy weight. Even before Mom answered, I knew this wasn't some minor infraction, a parking ticket, or a petty shoplifting incident. She stole money, Mom said, each word laced with trembling devastation. Thousands of dollars from her friends. They pressed charges. A heavy silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating, as I grappled to process the enormity of what I was hearing. Mom went on to explain the details, how Mallory had manipulated those closest to her, used their trust against them. She had somehow convinced them to let her manage certain online payments and then, with calculated precision, had transferred the money into her own account. One of them finally caught on, saw the discrepancies, and went straight to the police. Suddenly, everything clicked into place, the desperate pleas for loans, the vague, boasting posts about making moves, the inexplicable shopping sprees filled with items she clearly couldn't afford. She hadn't just lied her way through life, she had, in a very real sense, stolen her way to this precipice. She needs us, Mom said, her voice breaking the oppressive silence. She wants us to bail her out. A bitter, humorless laugh threatened to erupt from my chest, a twisted parody of amusement. Of course, she does. Mallory has never faced consequences in her entire life if she could wriggle out of them. And you're going to do it, aren't you? I asked, the sharpness in my tone betraying my rising anger and resentment. She's our daughter, Mom responded softly, the words filled with a maternal instinct I couldn't fully comprehend in this situation. We can't just leave her there. Yes, you can, I said, my voice firm and unwavering. She made her bed. Let her lie in it. But she's family, Mom pleaded, her voice cracking with emotion. She's also a liar and a thief, I retorted, the words stinging even as I spoke them. If you bail her out, she'll just keep doing this. Maybe not to you, but to someone else. She needs to face the consequences this time, truly face them. The line fell silent again, and I could hear her muffled sniffling on the other end. The guilt tugged at me, a familiar ache. You really think we should just leave her there? She whispered. Yes, I said, my resolve hardening. It's time she learns that actions have consequences, real and lasting consequences. I don't know if they ultimately caved and bailed her out or not. I made a conscious decision not to find out. I stopped answering their calls shortly after the conversation. I was finally truly done with Mallory and the constant chaos she dragged into everyone's lives. She'd spent her entire life running from responsibility, skillfully manipulating people to get what she wanted, and brazenly taking what wasn't rightfully hers. Now, at long last, she was facing the music, and as far as I was concerned, it was a symphony long overdue. For me, it was freeing. The anger had dissipated, replaced by a profound sense of relief. I was finally, blessedly, out of the mess. Mallory had meticulously constructed her life on a foundation of lies, and now that foundation had finally crumbled beneath her feet. Karma, as they say, is a patient and unforgiving force. It never forgets.